welcome to Check It Out, Comrade, podcast where we bring you 2 games by the people for the people and tell you what we like about them. I'm Nick Lauber.
And I'm Gary Butterfield.
And that was my first attempt to change up that intro.
Good job, buddy.
Yeah, that works,
Good
right?
job.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
This week we're doing They Bleed Pixels and Oxenfree.
Indeed we are. Yeah. So let's get into it.
Absolutely.
They Bleed Pixels.
They Bleed Pixels.
Yeah, this is a game developed by Spooky Squid Games. Mm-hmm. And this is an old one.
Oh, very old one, yeah.
Yeah, this came out August 29th, 2012, but there's no rule against that.
And at the time of us releasing this episode, it will be the fall sale, where it is on sale on Steam for $2.
Yeah, super cheap. This is something that was recommended in Slack. Slack has been an invaluable resource for getting recommendations.
Absolutely.
And stuff. And Nick, what is tell me about They Bleed Pixels. What's cool about They Bleed Pixels?
So They Bleed Pixels is a platformer, and it is definitely of the like flow variety. It's got some pretty tight controls. It feels, it's kind of got that Meat Boy feel to it, but it also has combat, and the combat emphasizes sort of combos and chaining together attacks and stuff, which makes this game I feel probably incredibly fun to watch. So people who are really good at this game are probably incredibly fun to watch, and I will probably go back and find I'm pretty sure it was in last year's one of the GDQs last year. But yeah, it has a very big emphasis towards that, which isn't quite for me. I mean, even Meat Boy, with the Meat Boy is kind of the perfect indie platformer. It's all just tight controls and nothing else there. This takes a little more on top of that, and it still doesn't quite grab me to the extent that it would other people, I think. Yeah.
This is a real good example of something that I think is probably pretty good. That's not for me as well. And it's similar. So that Meat Boy or N Plus.
Yeah. Or kind of Dust Force. Have you ever seen Dust Force?
I've seen it, but I haven't played it.
Yeah, a lot of these games that kind of emphasize kind of the perfect run, right?
Sure, like wall jumps. Mm-hmm. This kind of really tight platforming stuff, which I actually like. I dig that. One of the things about at least N Plus and Meat Boy though is you're pretty zoomed out, so it becomes kind of about planning this run. This kind of is a weird. I think this is a kind of those two types of games that aren't married perfectly. Like they're not. It's not a dumpster fire,
right?
But like they don't. So like being this close, you're pretty close up in this. Yeah. So there are times where like there are a couple of leaps of faith I had to make. Which I think is, in that kind of thing, like then it's trial and error. Like then it's, I leapt and fell and I got killed by these spikes. So now I'm going to try this again, knowing that information. Like you don't have complete information,
right?
As opposed to something like Meat Boy or N Plus, where it's like, I can see the entire stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right from the beginning, which I think is good. And the combat I actually think is pretty great.
Yeah, the combat's the fun part about this for sure.
It's very simple. Like it's you have a very limited moveset, but within that moveset, you can do a lot of like kind of cool juggles. Like it feels really good. And it's in the kind of fiction of the game. The way it describes it to you is that like you can just go up to these guys and hit them. But the game explicitly says like it would be more fun to do this.
Right.
And then enemies will also block you after a time to prevent you from being too spammy.
Yeah.
Although all that stuff I think is actually pretty good. It's weird though, because it doesn't, times I would get into the combat, then I would, I'd fight one guy and then I would have like a long series of very, very difficult kind of platforming challenges with like wall jumps and not just wall jumps, but like we had to cling to a wall because there's 3 surfaces of something that will kill you or 3 sides to a surface and one of them won't.
Right.
So you have to cling to that. So it definitely is leaning on that kind of ultra hard platformer thing,
right?
Which I think is probably not quite as good as it's kind of neat as the combat, or at least as satisfying. So it kind of, there's like a weird kind of whiplash to it, going back and forth between those two things that they just don't totally work for me. It's like a marriage that'll work. It's like a loveless marriage.
Yeah. I think Dust Force takes those mechanics, like it takes tight platforming, but with level design that's more focused on flow. And the aesthetic of it isn't. It's very pretty, but it isn't as like as pulling as this one. Like I like that this is actual enemies and it has this horror H.P. Lovecraft aesthetic. Dust Force is all just like guys sweeping up leaves, which is cute. But I kind of wish this had more of an emphasis on the flow of the combat, and I want more like groups of enemies and stuff. I know it ramps up as you go on. I only got a couple levels in, but sparsing out the enemies there's nothing to it. And when fighting one enemy is not very fun, fighting a bunch of enemies and getting them bashed into each other and making a bomb explode over here that tosses this guy into a saw blade over there, that's where the fun comes in.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is that like, and the platforming complexity ramps up way faster than the fighting complexity does.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of a bummer. I didn't get too far in it because it was too hard for me. Like, right. And the difficulty, you'd think like, oh, how does the difficulty affect the platforming? Like it does. It's like fewer spikes. And then the really kind of interesting, the one thing about this game that is actually super unique is the way that it handles save points or checkpoints, which is a resource you collect. Mm-hmm. So there's this like really cool risk reward thing. Like it's, imagine like coins. If you collect enough coins and can stop for a minute and take a breath, it'll create a checkpoint. But as you go, and as soon as like the third level, like when I talk about it ramping up difficulty too quick, I mean it. As soon as the third level, they start putting those coins in pretty dangerous areas. Yeah. So like if you want to, you can either kind of do a relatively safe way through the entire level, not collecting the optional things. But if you fail at that relatively safe way, you go all the way back to the beginning. Yep. Or you can take some risks and actually create some checkpoints. It's like the inverse of Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
Where like Shovel Knight, you
save by default, but if you
take the reward, right. You gain additional reward by sacrificing that security. Like the default is to get the checkpoints.
It definitely is a weird way to go about it. Like
I think it's actually kind of good. Like it's interesting, and it made like a couple parts where I was like, man, I could make that series of jumps to get enough save crystals, but like, geez, right. Like, is that worth it? But the thing is about that system, like, I think it's good and interesting. Again, I don't think it's kind of elegantly presented here, because what it means is if you decide to take that risk and you fail at it, you're just starting over anyway, and it's a bummer.
Right. And it's, and with a high difficulty, platformer like this, like Meat Boy's whole thing is, you always start at the same spot, but the turnaround is really quick. And this has that quick turnaround. And it has this checkpoint system, which means that those leaps of death and stuff that you mentioned, and the fact that you're not going to make it through the level the first time because of all the obstacles in the way, those checkpoints are there to help you. You'll very quickly restart back at your last checkpoint. But if you have to risk your life in order to form a checkpoint, you're going to be more averse to it and frustrate yourself by starting over at the beginning so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely got a little bit more frustrated than I wanted to.
Yeah.
In this game, because it just like I was expecting the combat when it works is very empowering. Mm-hmm. I wasn't expecting something breezy, but I also wasn't expecting something quite as difficult. Yeah. But I will say that like even Meat Boy, which like I like, I played Meat Boy and was like, oh, this is pretty good, and then Isaac came along and was like life changing,
right?
For me. So like I'm not well suited to ultra difficult platformers. Yeah,
me neither. I mean, I definitely hit a wall on Meat Boy and stopped, but I very much appreciate both these games for what they do right.
Sure. Yeah, it is. I agree with that. Like, I think that what this does well is actually pretty neat, and I want to look up that speed run as well.
Yeah.
Something else I want to bring up too about the platforming is that it is has the same problem that Magical Cat Girl game has.
Momodora?
No. The other anime cat girl game we played, the one where the powers combine.
Oh yeah.
Why can I not? We just did that. Yeah, Copy Kitty. We didn't just do it. We did a live episode in between, but it has the same problem Copy Kitty does, where the levels have no sense of place, so it's easy to get lost in them.
Yeah, that's true.
Like they're just bland like neon platforms with spikes and stuff, and like that kind of bums me out. It's not quite like wave based combat like Copy Kitty. You're still trying to get from one end to another. Mm-hmm. So you can remember the twists and turns and things.
Yeah, there's a little bit more linearity to it.
But it's very bland level design.
Yeah, the level design isn't all that interesting. The backgrounds are, but the actual placement of objects and stuff in the levels are not.
Yeah. I have no sense of like what this is in the world. Like, and it's supposed to be like a dreamscape, thing. Yeah. Like she goes to sleep and goes and fights these monsters. Like, fair enough. But I just I like looking like I'm like, oh, this is a church. This is a house. Yeah. This is a library. Like I like that a lot. And that doesn't have to be restrictive as what like the actual platforms are. Like if you look at something like Symphony of the Night, that library makes no sense,
right?
But it's just like, oh, this is a library. Yeah. I'm fighting library themed enemies, and here are books, and like I'm fighting books, and
absolutely,
I think that's kind of great.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So this might have an amazing story. I didn't get to it, but I am glad I played it, and it's been on I had this on Steam forever.
Yeah.
So it's
I think it's been in multiple bundles, and like I said, it's $2 right now. So
Yeah.
if you enjoy that sort of difficult platformer and this has managed to slip under your radar, like check it out. It's definitely definitely good.
Like it's basically free.
Yeah.
So
So let's move on to Oxenfree.
let's do it.
So Oxenfree is it's an adventure game developed by Night School Studios and was released January 15th, 2016. It's available on Windows OS X, Xbox One, PS4, and Linux.
Indeed. And this is a studio that's made up of Telltale alum.
Mm-hmm.
And that DNA is all over it. There's a
Adam Hines from Tales of the Borderland. Yeah, that's
yeah.
so.
He's the lead. He's the main guy who wrote this.
Mm-hmm.
And Tales from the Borderlands, like I played the first episode of that, and it's like cute.
Right.
A lot of people are like, "Oh, it's the best thing ever!" Like it's a pretty fun action adventure.
I'm sure it's the best of the Borderlands franchise.
100%. Like it is by far the most tolerable thing with the words border and lands on them. But until like Land Border 3 comes out or whatever. But it didn't encourage me to keep playing it. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I can't wait to find out what happens to these characters. Right. Because every Telltale game has like the episode 2 drop off. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is kind of some of that same philosophy. One of the goals in this is to create that kind of complete Telltale experience without leaning on the episodic nature. So there are no cliffhangers or anything like that. It's not. It's all done in one story.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely has that emphasis on making dialogue decisions, but how that actually plays into the plot, we'll get to a little bit later because that's definitely much less emphasized.
It's there's not there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah. So
let's get into it and just do the basics first. Sure. So yeah, so Oxenfree, you play a young lady whose brother has recently died, and you're going to an island to kind of do like they do kind of a getaway, like a bender.
Some hood rat shit.
Yes, you do some hood rat shit. It's your new stepbrother, a longtime friend, your brother's ex-girlfriend. I guess ex. I mean, still, he died.
Yeah, your dead brother's ex-girlfriend.
Yes,
who's also a classmate of yours. And her friend,
right? Who is new, and you're on an island. You're gonna just get up to some shit. However, you head into a cave on this island, and end up tuning into something supernatural with a radio.
Yeah.
It's not too much of a spoiler to say that then you are supernatural shit happens.
Yeah.
And that's storyline. What we can say without spoiling, we'll go into the storyline in the spoiler section, but there's some mechanics we can still talk about.
Absolutely.
A little bit. That are not spoilers. I guess it is worth saying though that if you've heard other good things about this, if it sounds like something you would dig, it's a good time to like say that if it sounds like something you'd like, you should play it. Because I wouldn't want to play this if I knew everything that happened in it. Really.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Storyline threads are the point of the game. So if you're not there to continue the thread of the storyline, you're not going to enjoy it.
And for me, it became a thing whether if that storyline outweighs the kind of mechanical stuff I'm going to talk a lot of shit about here in a minute. For me, it didn't. Like I don't like this game very much. Like I thought it was fine. I don't hate myself that I spent this time with it, but I ended up being pretty irritated with it for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe a little bit north of neutral on it. But it's definitely not. This has some real positive reception that I think I'm not quite on board with.
Yeah, this is a critically lauded game, and a lot of people, when I was kind of complaining about it on Twitter, are just like, very much like, oh man, I loved it. And when I would press them about it, and not in like a dick way, like, oh, yeah, what'd you fucking like about it? But if somebody likes something I don't like, I want to know what they like about it,
right?
Because like I want to see if it unlocks the thing that I'm not getting.
Not to be an asshole, just to find out what you're missing.
To have a conversation, and the people who did, like, it just comes down to whether the things that bother you or bothered me about it bothered you more than you liked the story,
right?
Like, than you were touched by the story. And I didn't find the story that touching. Like I found a couple parts of it pretty good, but I was like, okay, this is a pretty average kind of narrative. Like it's good, it's like well constructed and stuff, but it's like not mind-blowing. It's not Torment. It's not a story that like I'm gonna take forward with me till the end of my days.
Right.
And then the actual mechanical quibbles and the way that story is told like interfered with it too much.
I can definitely feel some of your pain there for sure.
Yeah.
But so we'll talk a little bit more about mechanics before we get into a spoiler section. Just want to note that this is also on sale in the Steam fall sale that's going on right now for $5 total, which is pretty good.
And we're recording this like before the episode, like shortly before the episode comes out, so you'll be able to hit up that sale this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the primary mechanics, and it's something I just want to, it's not a major mechanic in terms of how it relates to the narrative, but it is a major mechanic in terms of what you're going to spend your time doing.
Yeah, time spent, definitely.
One of the things is this radio, which I talked about. That's how you kind of tune into this otherworldly force.
Right.
Everything in this game that substitutes, so it's not a puzzle game. A lot of people talk about like puzzles in adventure games or puzzles in video games. There are almost zero puzzles in this game.
Right.
Like it is, you have it's like an activity. Like you have this radio at certain points to do certain things, either to like invoke this supernatural force or unlock locks. And you have to tune this radio dial. And every time this happens, like it gets more complicated as you go. You have a limited bandwidth and you gain a better radio. Like you get an upgrade in this game that has a wider bandwidth. And it is just you slowly searching a radio dial.
Exactly.
And you spend so much time doing that. And there's no like, okay, if I figure out this puzzle, it tells me which frequency to go to. And there's not even like, BioShock style, like, oh, if I go into this room, the frequency I need to go to, need to use is written on the mirror backwards.
Right.
It's just trial and error. Like it's just running the entire bandwidth. And you do this for every single like bit of interactivity in the game, really.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's very frequent.
And it just doesn't add like a thing.
No, and you get like you'll get accustomed to it to the point where you'll be like be able to scan through more quickly than you were at the beginning. You're still scanning through the whole band of the radio.
And that would have been such an easy way to make this feel a little bit more of like if there was something you had to kind of get the information as to where you're supposed to go, or could even intuit it. Like, yes, you'd be able to scan everything and brute force it, but if you were paying attention, maybe you'd be able to do it a little bit quicker or something. Like there was an opportunity there, I think, to actually throw a little like, game like into it. Like I'm not trying to get into like what is a video game thing, because it's definitely a video game, but a little bit more gaminess that would have been like, okay, I can save myself a little bit of time because I'm paying attention.
Yeah, totally.
So that's a huge bummer for me. I hated that. The biggest thing this is a kind of mixed thing. I think this game does this well and kind of shitty, but the thing that another thing really people love about it other than the narrative is the dialogue in it. So what will happen, the actual bread and butter of this game is walking around this island with a companion and having conversations.
Right.
The entire game is built, or 80% of the game is built around this. So paths between areas are huge and winding. So getting from one end of the screen to the other, you'll be doubling back. You'll be like climbing up and down, cliffs. It takes a long time to make room for these conversations.
Exactly.
That's the idea. The dialogue, I think, does feel like relatively natural, even if all the characters are like super snarky.
Well,
but like
after the beginning, like the start of the game, like I care so fucking little about what any of you guys are talking about at the start of this game, because they're just trying to build them up as normal teens and stuff, which I understand helps grow to the rest of the game, but it's so fucking boring in the beginning.
It is really bad because I'm not into teens.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of teens.
I'm just not super into them. And like, I get there are a lot of people who I think really like this, like people who are kind of into indie stuff really romanticize this period of life more than maybe I do.
Could be,
or I think that's a thing where like there are people who are just like, man, like real teens.
Yeah, and just to more nostalgia for that period of life.
Yeah, like their figures are fun to me. And this was not relatable to me. Like I didn't have like, oh man, me and my friends would go to the beach and make quips at each other for like an hour straight. Everyone is there's a little bit of that Aaron Sorkin, like everyone is ready with a, something. It's not quite, I mean, maybe not like Aaron Sorkin. It's not like that kind of hyper real, but everyone is kind of a sarcastic jokester. Everyone is very like, I saw a reviewer compare it's like Daria, but it's like 5 Darias.
Yeah, it's everyone's Daria where everyone's Daria.
Darias. Yeah. like the sequel to Daria, like the Daria
Oops, all
complex.
Darias.
Yeah. TM Daria. So I think that's actually pretty good. The way that it kind of flows once you get into it, once you get past that initial hump.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah. The thing I don't like about it is, one, you have like a split second to choose your response.
Yeah.
What is up with that?
That's weird. I think I saw someone in Slack trying to say like they're trying to encourage you to talk over off. To make the dialogue seem more natural. You know, people do talk over each other a little bit, or they respond fairly quickly because they're thinking about what the person is saying the whole time. But there's so many times where I'm like, I'm so used to video games. I want them to finish their thought so that I know what I want to respond with.
Or like, heaven forbid, I actually get invested in what they're talking about. You know, like, heaven forbid, like, I actually start to like them as characters.
Yeah.
And want to know what they have to say, you know? Especially when it gets to like the weird kind of supernatural elements, it might be important what they're saying.
Yeah.
You know, so my instinct is to listen, but you can't. Like, you have to kind of cut people off or just be like absolutely right on the trigger. And I definitely misanswered some things.
Mm-hmm.
They also, the three different color, I guess I didn't know this until after I played it, but there are three different colors, your responses. Two of them look exactly the same to me.
Oh, I didn't
do that in games. Like, just a colorblind, it's not even like colorblind mode. You just have to you have to use high contrast colors. Yeah, the top one and the right one look identical to me in color, but they correspond to different tacks.
I didn't even notice. Like, if it was color coordinated, it completely passed my brain entirely. So that's definitely not just you.
Yeah, it's you don't have to. You can also just read the content, but that is also slower. You know, if you're trying to jump in there real quick, you know.
Yeah, I'd never discerned that. That's crazy.
So that was a little bit annoying.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing with the dialogue though was that like they aren't timed well and they don't cross screens. So like you can get to, you know, the game knows where you're going. It has an illusion of non-linearity, but it's not.
You're right.
You know, like you have set tasks.
It's certainly linear, yeah.
You have one kind of major choice where like you can, you know, choose who to save at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
Between the other person. I did one. I don't know what happens if you do the other. But other than that, like for the most part, it's pretty linear. But the game doesn't like match those dialogue conversations to equal the amount of time it takes to go from one side of the screen to the other.
Yeah.
So like what can happen is either you finish a very short conversation and then just have, you know, a couple minutes of just like very slow traversal over this island, or you get to the end of the screen and you just have to stand there and finish talking, because if you go to the next side of the screen, the conversation will end.
Yeah, they should have let it continue on through next screens.
100%.
And
yeah.
I mean, I was trying to play it quickly, and like I was purposely getting to the end of screens before the dialogue's over. I'm like, this is just flavor text, this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait for this.
No, I wasn't invested enough to like want every little bit.
Yeah.
There's a little side thing about collecting letters. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Like,
there's collecting letters, and there's also like rocks, like those little rock piles.
Yeah.
That if you tune your fucking radio at those rocks, you'll get little messages.
We have to get over like video games trying to get you to explore their boring worlds by just sprinkling them with collectibles.
Collectathons is dumb, yeah.
Yeah, like we just have to get over that. Like, get the true ending by like really exploring our world. How about you make a world that's fucking worth exploring, and like I'll just do it.
I think luckily it doesn't actually play into the ending. It's just more flavor text you can get, so that's good. But
there's a lot of endings to this. I don't know. You could be right. I thought it did though.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, there's several different endings, but you also could be right. I don't know. So that's the big thing I think with the dialogue, as an issue, and those are the mechanics. Like, other than just like that traversal, it doesn't.
Yeah, the traversal is not very fun.
It gives you a map that I find pretty frustrating because because there are so many switchbacks. Like, it's hard to know the direct place.
Yeah,
you know, the direct way to go.
I ran into that a couple times. It's not too bad. Generally, it's like, okay, if I'm in this area and I find a route left, I'm going to end up in the area that's to the left of this one. But there's definitely a couple spots where if you have to take the high road and then go left to get to this area, or the low road and then go left to get to this area. Yeah. And those ones are annoying.
It's not a huge deal if like traversing wasn't so boring.
Wasn't slow. So slow.
Your characters walk slower than any teen I've ever seen. Like, they have energy, guys. Like, you know, I understand Daria wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere, but like these kids are under supernatural threat. Why aren't they like in a light jog?
Right.
They just move very, very slow.
Yeah. And it picks up when they're not talking.
Yeah.
Which makes me wish I could just be like, nah, like, I don't want this conversation.
Yeah, please just be quiet and let me, like, for a game that, like, I don't think is without merit, I wanted this to end so badly. Like, the entire time I was playing it, I'm like, end. There should be a, like, once you're just, like, so can you imagine, like, going around and trying to collect all the things without this, there's no fast travel, which I get, like, you know, they want to have room for these conversations. It's not trying to be very video gamey, but, like, at the first time I took one of those wrong turns, I got to the end of one of these diverticula and was just like, oh, I went the wrong way. I have to go all the way back.
Right.
Like, I wanted to quit. Like, I was so cranky about it. And I'm like, oh, if I open the map, maybe I can go back to that crossroad or something. Nope. And my guys didn't say anything on the way back because they had already, like, said their stuff on the way there. So, like, just watching two little dolls walk across a landscape forever. And when I say forever, it's like 5 minutes to go from what, you know, but 5 minutes is a long time for non-interactive, boring navigation.
Yeah, I had a problem with it too at the very beginning. When I first started it up, I was at the beach right when you do the cave stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I need to go do something. So right after, and this is the very beginning, so I'm not spoiling everything, but right after the stepbrother enters the cave, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to stop here. And I shut the game down and started it back up next time. And it's at the very fucking beginning of that beach scene. I didn't realize it only saves on screen transitions.
It doesn't even save on screen transitions. It does not autosave often. Like, it's autosaves way less than you think it does. So I ended up having to redo a large portion.
Yeah, I was so annoyed.
Yeah. So I mean, those are the mechanics, right? Like that's what you're doing, and you're going through this narrative. I don't know if there's much else that can be said without going into the narrative.
I don't think so. I think we will do some wrap up here, and we'll come back with a spoiler section and talk more about the story, which is the good part of this game. So, like,
yeah, it's going to be more positive. I have some issues with it, but not nearly as many as I do with how it's presented.
Absolutely. So, you know, we're negative Nancy's here, but there's more positive things to say after the break. But also, don't listen to it if you want to play this game.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, some admin stuff real quick. If you like the show and want to support us, the best way to do that is patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. There you can throw us a couple bucks a month and get access to early access feeds or our Slack channel or physical goodies. And yeah, that helps us out a lot. That's our main source of keeping this all afloat. You can also give us ratings and reviews on iTunes. That also helps spread our audience around. And if you have a game you'd like to suggest or just want to interact with us, we're on facebook.com/checkitoutcomrade or on Twitter @Comrade Podcast. And there's a suggestion form on Duckfeed.tv/contact. I think there might be one on checkitoutcomrade.com, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah,
you can always go to the contact form. Yeah. So I think that's more or less it. And then tell people.
Yeah.
If you think they would like it.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
Tell your family over the Thanksgiving. No, this is too late.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah. Tell them over Christmas.
Yeah.
And then this is also the first time. So we're announcing it after we do our episode on Tyranny. We're going to take a hiatus, which we do like a holiday hiatus to kind of refresh and get ahead on some games. Thank you to everybody who donated to Duckstream. Those people who donated games, if you have not answered the email I sent you yet, please do. Send us email and let us know what game you want us to cover.
Yep, because we will be kicking off when we come back next year. We will be kicking off with the dictated games.
Yes.
Unless Afterbirth Plus comes out, which then we might start with that and then move on to the Comrade Dictator games.
Yes. And we should also say that we're not going to pair those probably because they tend to be longer and meatier. So we'll probably be putting those. We're not going to pair them with other fan mandated games.
Right. So yeah, each one will be one dictated game and one potato game we pick up from elsewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably it.
Yep. All right. So a little ditty here, and we'll come back with some more about Oxenfree.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing you're dealing with in this game, like the supernatural threat, are ghosts.
Yes.
Of people who died in a submarine.
That is correct.
On the island. And the coolest part of this game and how it tells its story, the thing I didn't want to spoil, other than just the narrative, is as you're going through, you can get kind of caught in these time loops.
Yes.
Like the ghosts have these time powers for some reason. And what they can do is it makes everything have this kind of VHS aesthetic to it that I think is actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, and this is a cliche thing that's not fashionable, but it reminded me of like the old Slenderman YouTubes, where like when he would show up, you'd get these screen tears and stuff.
It was interesting when it first came out.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's still a cool idea.
Yeah.
You know, and that's pretty neat. I like that bit of the story.
And
what else is
the possession
is good about
the possession with the other people too, as a means of speaking through them, is another aspect that ghosts have, and that tends to play out pretty interestingly.
Yeah, they possess your friends and companions, and
sometimes you,
and kind of say things, you know, speak through you, and kind of the game part of this, other than the personal story, which is about this grief, you know, with your brother, is about figuring out what these ghosts want, kind of bargaining with them, interacting with them, and figuring out how to, you know, you essentially just have to get off the island itself, but getting past them so you can do so, because they do have these time powers and stuff.
They are trying to stop you from leaving the island for sure.
It should be noted, like if you're listening to this and think that that is going to be kind of front and center, it's not. And one of the things I think is kind of weird about this game is that you spend most of your time just kind of shooting the shit. Like nobody is scared enough for me in this game. Like you start off kind of scared, but then you start getting into petty bullshit like pretty quick. You know, like, oh, I thought you said that, you know, you thought I was trustworthy, but now you don't. Like they get into teen speak real fast. One of the kids starts, you know, does an irresponsible amount of drugs. It's played for comic relief in it, and it's like, there's fucking ghosts. You know, be terrified.
The first
what are you
time,
doing?
like, why the fuck would you ever do that a second time when there's ghosts? Or I mean, at that point, I guess it's not like they're not sure what's going on. There's weird stuff happening, but still, why the fuck would you do that?
You might have to operate heavy machinery. Like you fucking, and again, like I can hear people listening to this, like, oh, they're teens, they're going to do stupid shit. But it's just like, when I was a teen, I wasn't immune to fear.
Yeah, when I was scared, I
was scared.
Grew the fuck up real quick.
Yeah, fear makes adults of us all, you know? So like, there's a little bit of, in general, like, lack of stakes for me.
Yeah.
In the whole way. Like my characters, there's a disconnect in how my characters react. You know, even if I'm not choosing like the jokey option, like like sometimes there are like two jokey options and one kind of flippant option, and there's no like, hey, I just need a minute. There are ghosts possessing. I'm not sure if we're gonna make it out of this alive.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at a certain point in the game, I was on the same level as the characters of like, God, when the fuck is, like, at this point, you guys are just annoying the piss out of us.
Yeah.
Like, no one's getting hurt. Really, like after the first scares of someone actually getting hurt, you're like, oh well, they're just fucking with us, and I just want this to end, right? The possession and the time loop stuff, I get them being sick of that, but it covers like almost the entirety of it, rather than just like, you know, the latter half of realization about what they're actually capable of.
Well, it's also, and something that I think is a truism. I think is like Paul O'Brien, who's a comics critic guy who's the first person I heard say this, but I think it a lot, is that it's not an excuse for badness in your product that characters talk about it. You know, it's like if characters are sitting around criticizing the plot, that doesn't excuse the plot being bad.
Right.
It's like actually an extremely bad sign that your thing is not very good. You know, so like the fact that like, you know, the characters being like, hey, this is just actually really boring and tedious. Like, that doesn't make it not boring and tedious.
It's not quite to that level, but I see what you're getting at.
But the characters just being like, God, can we get on with it? There's literally a part where when you first find the first of the letters that are going to be like your quest item thing, your stepbrother is like, man, we got to find all these and get the story of the island. And there's an option your character can say is like, no, that sounds like a boring chore. And like, that's exactly what it sounds like. And you better believe I said that, but like, the developers acknowledging that it would be boring does not make it not boring.
It definitely doesn't make the thing not boring. I mean, it's nice for the player as a comedic relief element, but it doesn't.
But the other option could be like, and especially some of this like bad will I'll admit was wrapped up when I thought that was tied into an ending. So if that's not tied into an ending at all, then like that's a little bit more forgivable.
Right.
And
I'm not entirely sure. I didn't go for any crazy endings or anything.
Yeah. To me, the stuff that worked in the story without like actually doing a bit by bit plot stuff.
I don't think we have time for that even.
Yeah.
So.
And yeah, we don't, is the stuff when like you actually do, so you start kind of going back in time and being around your brother.
Mm-hmm.
And there's you're just kind of reliving things. You're time quaked, like quantum leaped back into yourself, essentially, and you're getting a chance to say goodbye or say the things you wanted to say to him, since you didn't know he was going to die.
Right.
And that stuff was actually like pretty affecting. I like the relationship between the main character and her brother quite a bit.
I do too. Yeah. I thought that stuff was pretty effective. I'm not sure I really buy into the choices that are put up. You kind of have choices about like how you want to treat people, which affects the ending, in that you kind of get a brief wrap up that shows how everyone kind of feels about you at the end, which is kind of the main tie into a Telltale style deal there, because there's a lot of choices you're making throughout the game, and depending on those choices, they'll feel different ways about you at the end.
Yeah.
But those weren't super affecting for me, I don't think. No,
because I didn't care about anybody really except for the main character and the brother.
Right.
Like I didn't. The stepbrother is kind of okay. But the two other characters, like the little comic relief friend guy, felt unreal to me.
Yeah, Ren's annoying as shit.
Ren is really bad. And then the character who is your brother's ex-girlfriend is just like a psychopath. And you can call her that, you thank goodness. But she's unsympathetic to an extreme. And then her friend was like a non-character.
Yeah. So there wasn't the Daria of the Darias.
Yeah, just like the Daria Inception.
Yeah.
So really it was just like a little bit my character and the stepbrother, and then my character and the memories of her brother.
Yeah.
And that's good. It's a role playing game. Like you get to actually do some role playing in it.
Right.
You can do more than just like see how your friends care about each other though, because I resurrected my brother.
Yeah. So that's the one interesting thing. I did not do that. So I'm interested in how that played out, because you can replace the stepbrother in the current time with your actual dead brother
by encouraging your dead brother so you're not actually like, they're not visions, you're actually going back in time and changing what you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
However, there's like a kind of an implication that you're stuck in like a loop, because when you try to restart with your stepbrother gone and your brother back, you are going back to the island. There's
an implication of that regardless.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So regardless whether you brought him back, it is kind of a cycle. And I read a little bit about the endings and stuff like that. So, which means it has like a new game plus, which like there is way too much downtime.
Why would I give a fuck to play this a second time?
There is way too much downtime to play this more than once. Like it's kind of, when I was complaining about it, some people were saying that it's very similar in structure to like a visual novel, and like that genre does that bullshit too, where like you get to one ending and it says, well, that wasn't a real ending, play the entire thing again and make slightly different choices to kind of rush them on the story. And that, like, I don't want to play a game like over and over and over.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah,
I only get to be alive for so long.
Yeah, we're not gonna die. Visual novels, get this through your head. Also, there's a thing that a lot of people were impressed with that I am angry about. Is there's a weird little Dark Souls element to this, where you can see a ghost of yourself from other realities that suggest things to you.
Yeah. I did not care.
No, but it doesn't work. It's like a novelty, because what they can do is they can give you advice at those kind of junctions we talked about that give you the ending. They can give you advice similar to like soapstone messages in Dark Souls. There's no way to know if they are being sincere or not,
if they're helping you towards a better ending or not,
or helping you. There's no like rating system, even though the rating system in Dark Souls thing is not particularly noteworthy, because you can't tell which direction it's in, but like there's no rating or anything like that, so it's just kind of a way to like either encourage or fuck with people. But since I don't know, the actual tactical thing, the right thing to do is ignore them. Like they don't actually have an impact on your play,
right?
Other than the fact that you can get kind of fucked out of the ending you want the first time through when you don't realize that's what's happening, and then next time you ignore them.
Well, and the other thing is, when you get to record yours for other players to see, you don't know the impact of your choices yet.
Yeah, that's true. You're doing that before the actual ending.
Right.
So like I couldn't tell somebody the things that would bring my brother back to life because I don't know what brought my brother back to life at that point. It's made for like multiple playthroughs. Like it's like I know what the choices are. I'm going to go through this again and either try to fuck people's games up or steer them towards the best ending.
But there's not enough knowledge.
But there's no
about,
information.
Yeah, there's no way to know that that's what it's doing.
Yeah, they have no information. So if they're playing on their first time, they might get fooled. If they're playing on their second time, they don't know if either they already know the answer, so they know what to do, or they know enough to know that you could be trying to fool them and you should ignore it.
Right.
So it's like it's a novelty. It's kind of clever, but the people who I saw who were like kind of blown away by that were like, oh, that was another person. Like, there's Dark Souls. We just did a live episode on Journey. Yeah. Like this is done so much better by other games.
Like infinitely better.
Yeah. Like this, it's such a throwaway in this.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing the credit this game has kind of received. I don't, it's fine. It doesn't take anything.
I don't hate it. Like I said, I'm slightly north of neutral on it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I might be like neutral in it, but it's polarizing where like the things I liked, like the actual story with the brother, like some of the dialogue that I ended up liking was actually, in some of the actual creepy parts. There are a couple of, it's the other thing too, is like this is a horror game junior, like it is not meant to be scary at all.
Right.
But some of the parts that are actually a little bit unnerving, I liked. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole, I like those things, and then a huge host of things I disliked really strongly. So there's no, the whole thing was average. It's a collection of some things I liked, probably more things I disliked.
Right.
But it's not, nothing in it is like, oh, this is a 7 out of 10. It's like it's a 7 out of 10 in an aggregate. Right. But if those things that are utter failures, if those are important to you, I can't recommend it. Like if you are sensitive to pacing, like if something being slow or wasting your time or being paced slowly makes you furious, like it does for me, you will not have a real good time.
Yeah.
I feel like. So, yeah. I mean, I'm curious, I'm curious what the studio does. I'm frustrated when a game like this gets like tons of accolades without, because I feel like their follow-up is going to be like the same kind of thing, like a very similar game, without fixing any of this stuff.
Right.
Like, I mean, I could be wrong about that, but
it's not like it's been, 10 out of 10 everywhere. It's definitely, it's been
met with a lot of major awards.
Yeah, but it's like, still like major publications are giving it, 7s and 8s.
I guess that's true. So maybe they'll take a look and see what they could do better. It's what I think about a lot with like Firewatch is like, I just want, that game, it got a lot of like love, but I would love for the people who made it, for whatever their follow-up is, to like, take some of the criticism of it to heart.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to, this show more than any other show on the network puts me in the position of criticizing things that are politically in a good space. Mm-hmm. So you end up with things like that are really well loved. The people who I love Firewatch. People who I love Undertale.
Right.
And people who hate those games, some of them are just shitty trolls.
Yeah.
So like the developers of those games, like I can imagine the Undertale guy being like, I don't need to do anything different because everyone who loves this game loves it. Everyone who hates it is just somebody who hates the fact that it's a non-violent,
right,
charming game instead of Wolfenstein. But I don't hate it because of that reason. I hate it, I didn't like it for other reasons. Like there's the actual criticism to be found out there, even if most people are just being shitheads. So hopefully the people who make these kind of like indie darlings that are flawed, but get wrongly criticized, actually seek out the correct criticism as well.
Yeah. I'm totally with you there.
Anywho, thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah.
And and good
we'll see you next time.